Hey guys, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are talking about DNA because giving our DNA over to these genealogy companies are creating the worst privacy and law enforcement violations the United States has ever seen when it comes to civil liberties and rights. Now, consider the following cases that actually happen here in the United States. In California, by virtue of DNA testing, an innocent twin was thrown into jail. In Georgia, a mother was deceived into incriminating her son by giving up her DNA. In Texas, police met search guidelines by classifying a case as a sexual assault, but after the arrest only filed charges of burglary in order to get this person's DNA from one of the genealogy testing sites. In the county that started the entire DNA testing craze with the arrest of the Golden State Killer, prosecutors persuaded a judge to treat unsuspecting genetic contributors as confidential informants and seal searches so that consumers, meaning you and me, that are giving over our DNA to these companies, were not scared away by adding their own DNA to what is essentially being billed as a forensic stockpile. After LA County prosecutors filed 2 counts of murder against another man linked to a pair of decades-old cold cases connecting the suspect through a genealogy match, the district attorney Jackie Lacey refused to provide details of the genetic work, including the commercial genealogy service used. Similar genealogy searches remain sealed elsewhere in California, Texas, and Florida. The problem that we have here is that, one, when we give our DNA to these organizations, we are essentially signing away our rights because we know law enforcement is walking into these things and using them, and law enforcement itself is all over the map when it comes to DNA requests from these places. Public disclosure is an issue, and even who is getting scanned. Oftentimes, if you're searching a DNA database for a potential family match, you have to search the millions of people that are in these databases. Now, an investigation by the LA Times found, and I quote here, there is no uniform approach for when detectives turn to genealogical databases to solve cases. In some departments, they are to be used only as a last resort. Others are putting them at the center of their investigative process. Some, like Orlando, Florida, have no policies at all. Number 2, when DNA services are used, law enforcement generally declined to provide details to the public, including which companies detectives got their matches from. The secrecy made it difficult to understand the extent that privacy was invaded, how many people came under investigation, and what false leads were generated. And the last point, California prosecutors collaborated with a Texas genealogy company at the outset of what became a $2 million campaign to spotlight the heinous crimes they can solve with consumer DNA. Their goal is to encourage people to make their DNA available for police matching. And so here we have police that are using DNA databases. We don't know which ones. They're not disclosing this to the public, but they are solving cases. And then they are promoting this as basically saying, you can add your DNA to this to basically help solve a crime. Maybe your family member is a serial killer, whatever that is. I think that is a very serious issue because, like many things, our technology has fast outpaced our ability to basically have privacy laws. Now, we have constitutional amendments here in the United States. We have, for example, the Fifth Amendment, which is basically gives me the right and any American citizen the right against self-incrimination. And so the question is then, let's say, me am I self-incriminating myself by putting my DNA into one of these databases? We have the Fourth Amendment here as well, which basically requires law enforcement to get a lawful warrant to have what's called search and seizure. They cannot go in and simply, into your house without cause. And let's say maybe they hear somebody screaming for help, and if they don't, they have to go and they have to get basically legal permission from the court system to go in. But these companies, like many tech companies, are having these reciprocal agreements with law enforcement where they're simply allowing them in. And the question becomes then, if these companies are, let's say, promising us randomization, meaning my DNA is going to be in this database for research, and then the law enforcement goes into this database and finds out that, let's say, my DNA matches, let's say a relative of mine that's a serial killer or something along those lines, or somebody that's committed a crime, can they now de-randomize me and then match my DNA to this so that the law enforcement come to my house and basically say, oh, we know you have a cousin that's a murderer, whatever that is. These are things that we don't think about. And millions of us are giving our DNA to these companies. And as we come into the holiday season here, they're going to be running sales and promotions. And they are always running commercials about, well, I learned what ethnicity I was, or I learned I had, seventh cousins in Germany, and we all have the same whatever, and all this kind of stuff. But we don't really necessarily think beyond the scope of how it affects us in terms of our education on ourselves. We are potentially setting up our relatives, our children, our siblings, anybody else that's related to us as a possible privacy violation. And so if I have relatives, for example, cousins or whoever that have actually put given their DNA to 23andMe or what is it, History.com or Ancestry.com, not History.com, they are basically including me into that database in some way, shape, or form, because we share genetic code. And I don't think a lot of people are thinking about this, but given the amount of privacy violations, the ways that law enforcement, whom I respect and work with for the record, I do think we need a very solid police force in this country, given all the issues we have, but there's also a letter of the law here, and they are obfuscating basically what they're doing with this and where they're getting it from. And I think that's a very serious issue that we need to talk about. So that is your news of the day, and just think twice before you're giving your DNA up to a company like this. And if you have given your DNA up to a company, quite frankly, I don't necessarily know if you have the right to be forgotten, because we don't have that law here in the United States, which means I think you're out of luck, at least at the moment, until the laws change. So take that for what it's worth, and that is your news of the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, guys.